everybody, and welcome to the Aggieville Alleycats podcast. For come rain, shine, or anything between, we're here to deliver to you the Kansas State sporting news you so love. I'm Mace Edwards, right alongside
Connor Baltazar.
And welcome to this week's weekly recap, which is admittedly going to be it was a pretty slow week in the world of K-State sports. Outside of one event, well, two big events, and then one event that we're going to really make fun of because we think it's really funny. But before we get into this week's news, we do want to thank the sponsors of the show, and that is Greg, Arthur, and Grandma.
Thank you, Grandma.
And if you want to have your name read out at the beginning of every single episode, please be sure to check out the official supporters link both in our podcast and Twitter bios. But let's just dive straight into probably the most important of the K-State news, and that is I believe there's two gold medals for K-State, or is it just the one? And there was another medalist.
As of now, it's two gold medals, I believe, because obviously you have the one today, or I suppose yesterday, that's the day of release, with a new K-State track coach, an assistant track coach, Tara Davis Woodhall. She takes gold in the long jump. I think 7.1 meters was the final.
I think so. Yeah, that sounds right.
And then, of course, it's been a little bit, I guess, since it's happened. This was like last weekend, I think, at this point. But Eugene O'Malley was part of the mixed 4x4, and he was the leadoff on that. Two gold medalists from K-State, one athlete, and then one coach. Although she's obviously an athlete, just not for K-State.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting too, because whenever you think of a coach, you think of someone who's probably done competing. Apparently not.
Yeah, I don't think it's common for track, but if there's going to be a sport where the coaches still compete, it's almost always going to be track, I think, particularly for some of the younger assistants. But yeah, it was a really cool moment to see her get a gold medal. She also was kind of really famous on social media. She has almost 600,000 Instagram followers. So free propaganda for K-State athletics. I'm always happy about that. And then after she won the medal, it was on the NBC broadcast. After going and meeting her husband, the next person she ran to was K-State's new head track coach, Travis Geffert. So he got some time on the big screen as well.
Yeah. So in other words, the brand continues to grow to gargantuan levels that have never, ever been seen before by any brand ever.
World-renowned cats.
Exactly. Gold medalist cats, even.
The elite of the elite come to K-State.
Exactly. So that, we're 3.5 minutes into the episode, and that's probably the only real news that we're going to be talking about, because the next one is, consider it a spiritual successor to the wacky segment of the week, which died a year and a half ago or something like that.
It's resurrected a few times, but it comes and goes. It's currently in, we'll say, extended hibernation, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's probably as good a way to put it as any. But yeah, it was recently announced that, is it just the football stadium or is it everything? Because I think everything else already was this way.
I guess by blanket it is everything, but I think the football stadium's the only change as far as I know.
Yeah, Bill Snyder Family Stadium is going cashless. And for some reason that I am unable to decipher, this has apparently upset a weirdly high amount of people.
Yeah. I know we talked about it pre-episode, and we thought that it already was cashless. So this has zero effect on us. And I know all other venues, like baseball is cashless. I think men's basketball was cashless. I'm not 100% sure. It was at least mostly cashless. But the point is that this has been trending this way for a while. Uh, I I don't have an issue with it at all. The main reason is because I honestly at busy places hate paying with cash because then I'm just standing there
Like
after I've
fumbling with
paid.
your cash. Yeah.
Yes, like because I want my ones in front and the fives and the tens. Like I don't like just shoving everything into the wallet. So I always feel like I'm holding up the line. Cashless makes it easy, I think. I'm sure there's some people that I'm sure there's one person that has like tried to hold off on like getting credit cards or something. I don't know, but I mean, this is less a newsworthy item and more just kind of funny to sit back and see some of the reactions of a loud but truly very, very, very small portion of the fan base uh, overreact to this in ways never before seen because I think most of the concessions in the bill were cashless already, anyways, starting last year, a couple years ago, maybe.
I mean, because I don't remember ever, like, in the 4 or 5 years that I've gone to borderline every home game, missing like maybe one, three come to mind that I've missed. But every single time that I've gone to a game, I've never ever seen someone use cash, and I've never used cash at a concession stand there.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I th- I think maybe the last time I paid with cash maybe would have been like my freshman or sophomore year, maybe. But like I think maybe even like we think back to like that 2020 season, like I think everything might have been cashless then anyways because of COVID. So that kind of like provided a pretty natural breaking point to move into cashless. It's just the standard. But yeah, I mean, it's we're probably not too far away from cashless like going away entirely for the most part for like transactions at most businesses, particularly ones where they want to keep the line moving. Uh, but I don't know. The again, this shouldn't be a newsworthy item, but once again, the reactions of some K State fans have made it into a point of humor more than anything.
Because remember, K State is a liberal parentheses Marxist close parentheses university, and this is just the university falling to communism. Because if there's one thing that communists really love, it's debit cards that utilize the U.S. banking system.
Yeah, and you know what? Karl Marx, I think in the Communist Manifesto, I think there was a chapter about propping up creditors as well. So like, because that was like what he was all about, right? Was and just giving all money to creditors, right? And credit cards. Like he was a Discover Bank or Discover credit card guy, I think. So yeah, I don't know. It's just the latest in a modernization from K State that will draw ire for, maybe a day or two and then very promptly be forgotten by 99.9% of people. Um, it's just something that annoys people when it gets brought up, like
Yeah.
parking spots with the practice facility. Like nobody really actually cares about it anymore. But every time it like would like get brought up somehow on social media, you just get a firestorm.
Yeah,
Of
it became a nightmare scenario.
yeah. So I mean, the Olympics are a great time to announce changes like this as well. Like a slow, there's just like a Thursday afternoon in like the midst of a lot of like national news. Like, yeah, it's like the perfect time to just like trickle something out like this that the West Siders might get a little bit upset with. But
Yeah, I I don't know, man.
yeah,
Um, the last bit of K State related news, and I kind of want to. I know we didn't talk about this beforehand, but I kind of want to talk at least a little bit about the Deion Sanders thing because I think it's interesting slash funny as well. Plus, we've already established that there's very little in the actual news cycle. Um, but the last bit for K-State related news is something that hurt Connor and I very, very deeply. And I can't say it was entirely unexpected given information that we have received in the past. But Will Howard, who's currently at Ohio State, as pretty much everyone who's listening to this knows, um, he said something to the effect of he doesn't feel like now that he's at Ohio State, he doesn't feel like he needs to be the hero, and implied that there was basically no talent here at K-State, and that's why he needed to play as the hero. So, first off, let's just air it out now that this is mostly, at least people can guess on it. The departure was not as amicable as perhaps you and I originally believed / hoped. And I think that's all we should say.
Yeah. When I first saw this quote, I was pretty annoyed, like very annoyed. I've come down a little bit on that, not to say that I think it was the right thing to say, but it's more, I'm still definitely leaning more towards being annoyed with it. But I have kind of leveled out, I guess, a bit on it. I have a lot of thoughts on both what Will said and the fan base reaction to it that I like. We'd need like a whole separate episode, I think, to like just talk about that, and nobody would listen to it. So I'll try and keep it brief. I think that there can be some truth to what he said. Like objectively, Ohio State does have a lot of talent, particularly at positions relevant to players who'll be throwing the ball to. They have two really good running backs, and Ohio State is really well known for having some of the best receivers year in, year out in all of college football. One of the best receivers coaches, maybe the best receivers coach in college football, and Brian Hartline. I mean, you can tell how good he is because I know his name. And
you don't just know like random position coaches' names.
Yeah. So like that goes to show just how good he is at his job. With that being said, I do think it's fair to take it as an implication that he is saying that he had to do everything at K-State, that it was all on him. And I think that's also just coming from us to probably the two longest tenured Will Howard enjoyers, defenders, what have you. That's just patently false. He has played with some incredible talent while here at K-State. Obviously, Deuce Vaughn, that was a weapon that made his life so much easier through the first 3 years. Ben Sinnott, he was just a second-round pick to the NFL and was really, really excellent. And Cooper Beebe, even on the offensive line, he was a third-round pick and was probably the best offensive lineman in K-State history. And for quite a while, he had him protecting his blind side. And having a great offensive line is a huge asset as a quarterback. Malik Knowles was here, who obviously isn't some incredible NFL guy, but he really kind of shined as a senior in his final season, particularly when Will came on. And Will, I just don't think that there's any justification to the point of view that he had to be a hero more often than not, because I just don't think that's what we asked him to do most of the time. I just don't. I think that's just kind of a reframing, or it's rewriting history. I think. Now, if we want to go back in time, all the way back to his true freshman year, there were probably a couple times, particularly in the really bad moments of that season that we did ask a lot of him, probably more than he was capable of at that point, and that's fair. But man, that 2022 Big 12 championship team, like he was not really asked to play hero. He was asked to be a good quarterback, but I do think that there is a very, very sharp divide between being asked to be a good borderline all conference quarterback and being asked to be a genuine hero. And particularly in 2023, I don't think he ever really made it to that hero status. I think there was a bit of an argument for it during the Texas game when we were making that comeback, because he was really great during that. But I am kind of hung up on the hero ball thing. And I don't know. I'm kind of running out of steam here. I'll let you take over.
So even when you and I were some of the biggest, like you mentioned, we were some of Will Howard's biggest supporters ever since he got here, or ever since he was here, I suppose is the way to say it now. But even you and I never expected him to be hero. And you draw the distinction between being a genuinely good quarterback and being a hero. It's the difference between Ryan Tannehill and Caleb Williams in college. Ryan Tannehill was a good quarterback, a good enough quarterback to get drafted in the first round, but he was never touted as this hero. And we never expected Will to be a Caleb Williams, to be a Patrick Mahomes. Because those are the hero quarterbacks. And this isn't, well, I don't want to say it's no disrespect to him, because I feel like at this point, A, he doesn't listen, and B, who cares anymore? But he was never going to be that guy. He does not have the hero skill set. And I think to that extent, he's right on his evaluation of himself. But to say that Colin Klein in the offense, even if you want to go back to Courtney Messingham especially never expected Will Howard to be a hero. And I don't think Klein did either. I think everyone sort of recognized what Will was. And, in a vacuum, I don't take exception to him saying that Ohio State has more talent, because, in terms of however objective talent can be evaluated, he's right. Like, I'm not going to get mad at him for being right, but I just take exception to the idea that he wasn't surrounded by at least solid talent. You named a bunch of guys, and a lot of those guys went on to the NFL, and his most reliable targets in Phillip Brooks and Ben Sinnott in the last year are both NFL guys, although Phillip Brooks is a camp guy with the Chiefs right now. It's not like he had nothing and he had to fix it. And this is something that we touched on after the Texas Tech game. Everyone was going to fall in love with Avery basically the moment that he showed promise, because people were already in love with him. And I think what Will is trying to say, and this is me being perhaps even way too generous with my interpretation, because I want to believe in people a little too much. The most generous interpretation that I could come up with is once Avery made that debut, the expectations for Will got raised to being that hero. But here's the thing. The coaching staff almost certainly never believed that. That was a fan-imposed challenge or a fan-imposed problem. And the only time that Will ever got close to playing hero ball was TCU 2022, the first game. He was just good in the second game, but he legitimately clawed a K-State team that was dying, and that TCU came back into it. Granted, with help of Cade Warner, who I think was also catching an unnecessary stray because he somehow mossed one of the best corners in the Big 12. But It's 2022 TCU and 2023 Texas. He was really, really good in both of those games. I don't think anyone expected him to do that again and again and again. People saw him as, he's going to be good, but whenever he hits that second gear, that's when he can be a hero. It wasn't a we expect him to be, it is a we know he can be a hero. And I think that's an important distinction to make.
Yeah, I think that is a good distinction to make, because those are two wildly different things. And maybe it's Will doing some revisionist history to build up the underdog story, which I know is going to be really tough to do because he was like a top 10 portal quarterback. And
I think it was like second or third because I
yeah,
think it was Cam Ward, Riley Leonard, and then Will. Oh, wait,
yes,
Dylan Gabriel. So it was like four.
yeah. So, and you and I have kind of talked about that a little bit, how some of it is like kind of crafting a narrative around like being like doubted and stuff like that's extremely common in football, and it's getting more publicized now. Like you had Georgia players like after their national championships talking about how they were doubted, no one thought they could do it when they're like the unanimous preseason pick to win a national championship or something like that. So
Manufactured disrespect.
yes, that's the term for it that I keep forgetting. Thank you. But it's that could be where some of this is coming from, but yeah, this kind of stung a little bit. I've seen a lot of KC fans on both sides of the issue, which surprised me a bit. I was fully expecting to see maybe a larger turn against Will for the quote, but I think it ultimately comes down to when you look at it, there's like justification, I think, for either side because you can look at his time at K State and say, yeah, his weapons here weren't as talented as the type of receivers that he's going to have at Ohio State. But you can also look at it through the same lens and get to the conclusion that he's really throwing some unnecessary shade and disrespect at a K State coaching staff that really gave him chances that a lot of staffs wouldn't have. And that's with me understanding that like I still think he got a raw deal a lot of the times, uh, but he stuck around and didn't have to do that for a long time. And man, it's just kind of a strange situation, man. Like this is a staff that really like he was like their first quarterback recruit, like not named Jaron Lewis. So Jaron's in the scramble class, so he's the first real full cycle quarterback recruit. And Kleiman stood by him like when pretty much everyone hated him, and now he's really going back and kind of torching bridges with a coach that really uh, I think most coaches in college football would have pushed him to the portal. I
Yeah.
think, particularly at the Power Four level, because he had a lot of playing experience in those first 2 years and had moments, but it wasn't great. But Kleiman, like, he has the background on it. He knows Will. He really did get a raw deal. He could have left after 2020 when he was supposed to redshirt and just had a really rough season and just everything just didn't really go well. He could have left after 2021 and he really had his redshirt needlessly burned in that last game of the regular season. He could have left in that offseason between 21 and 22 when Adrian got brought in because he was the heir apparent to Skyler and the staff when got a guy in the portal. And then he ended the season well, and then he could have left after getting a Big 12 title. But he stuck around even with Avery Johnson coming in, even though the writing's kind of on the wall at that point. So it's just weird to see a guy stick through so much adversity at K State, internal and external. Uh, but then after leaving with a Big 12 championship, starting in 4 different seasons at the same school, which is like unheard of nowadays, to then kind of like kick mud up like when you're on the way out. Like I'm well on the way out. Like we're like 8 months removed from him portaling. So just really strange timing, I guess. Maybe that's not what he intended, uh, but I don't know. Will's always been a pretty good interviewer, so I think he knew how it would come off, if nothing else. But yeah, definitely a little disappointing to take from a K State side.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the best way to say it, is it's just disappointing because I mean, let's be abundantly clear here. I don't. I'm going to go ahead and say that Will has every right to be mad. He has every right to be mad at the fan base of K State. I I don't take any issue if he's upset with the fans. I really don't. I mean, because A, he's a year younger than me, and if I had to constantly deal with that in my ear, I'd probably be a little pissed off too. But the weird part to me is the shade thrown towards the coaching staff when, for all intents and purposes, it wasn't a personal decision. It was a business decision. Avery Johnson was going to be the heir apparent because Avery Johnson was the better quarterback. I mean, or at least he has the higher upside because Will is who Will is. And I think that this is just an example of probably someone taking a business decision personally. And whenever that happens, it gets hard as a third party to not take comments that come from it personally as well. So I get it. I get why he'd be upset. But I mean, whatever. He's a early 20s kid who said something in an interview, and we're probably not going to play him unless we somehow see him in the college football playoff. I will almost guarantee you that Brendan Mott will try to kill him if they somehow meet in the college football playoff. Like there will be a target directly on Will if K-State ever sees him again. And I think that Will is praying to God that doesn't happen. But I as long as we've talked about it, I on one hand I get that it's off season, so people are going to blow everything out of proportion. And while I do think it's annoying and most of all disappointing because of the cognitive dissonance that it has created within me of liking Will for so long, and now he's just kind of being a dick. um, it's kind of not too big a deal.
Yeah, yeah. I think you're probably right. I've talked about this way more than I thought I was going to initially, I guess, because I wanted to keep it brief. But I guess my thoughts boil down to I really kind of get why people think Will's in the right and why Will's in the wrong. I think I lean towards him being in the wrong. But yeah, I don't really have anything else to say, I guess.
Yeah. So to go on to a lighter topic, well, it's not really lighter, but it does directly involve K-State, so we can laugh at it more. The Deion Sanders situation. You may be asking yourself which one, and that, again, sort of speaks to the entire era up to this point. But for the uninitiated, the Cliff's Notes version of it was there have been multiple reports that have come out not only about a toxic locker room culture, but also a former 5-star getting basically the crap beaten out of him in the locker room for no particularly good reason. And that's, I mean, I'm not going to say that I'm unsurprised. It's, um, but I think it's threatening legal action immediately afterwards that's really funny to me. Because first off, what we are about to say is not legal advice. You should not take it as legal gospel. We are saying that for the bar association. um, but if for a defamation lawsuit, which is presumably what Deion Sanders would have to go for publishing the reports, first off, he's a public figure, which is near universally accepted to be a you've lost the defamation lawsuit. Um, but also, it would open the door. It wouldn't eliminate the lawsuit before discovery, and anything that would come out in discovery would almost certainly be worse. So,
Yeah, it's definitely been a weird bit of time for Colorado here. And Coach Prime, like I've always been on record going back to when they hired him as not really having an expectation, but just being genuinely really curious how it was going to go. Because I know there were a lot of people that were instantly like, Colorado natty, and there were a lot of people that were instantly like, Colorado going winless, horrible. Coach Prime doesn't know what he's going to do. I didn't really have much of a strong opinion, I guess, on it. I was just kind of curious to see how he'd do going from Jackson State to Colorado. And yeah, off the field's been pretty bad recently for Coach Prime, because the funnier bit of news for me recently, although it's not really news, it's just a funny happening, is that video they uploaded to Twitter where they have a Shadur throwing a deep ball in practice, but before the receiver catches it, they cut to what looks like a different throw. And the receiver catching the ball, which it's entirely possible the receiver caught that like in real life, but the way that it's cut makes it does not give that impression.
no, because
And
doesn't the ball like jerk back from where you
yeah,
would expect it?
it looks like it comes in a slightly different angle, maybe. So, and that's been making the rounds recently through college football, with a lot of schools making fun of Colorado for it. So I guess we'll see how long the experiment continues for Coach Prime at Colorado, because going 4-8 after just a really really bad season the year before, like that's not inherently bad. I think the issues more definitely stem from starting out hot and then just completely fizzling out. The amount of talent that's coming not translating to wins, and then of course all the off the field stuff. I think he's probably getting another year after this regardless, unless like someone dies or something like that. But
Don't rule it out.
I
Well, maybe. Well, if Brian Kelly can keep his job at Notre Dame after killing a kid,
that is true. So we can't rule out that there is no way that he loses his job. But yeah, it's definitely been an interesting time for Colorado. Um, I really don't know what to think about them this year. I still think that Shadur does get a bit overhated by the general football public. That doesn't mean that he's a first round quarterback. That just means that he's like a good quarterback. Like I think he's accurate. He's accurate. He like throws the ball well, but like he's not like a phenom. Like I think that's just the truth on like Shadur. Shiloh's like above average safety. Like they're good players. They're just like overhated and overhyped at the same time, I guess, if that makes sense.
yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense by virtue of each narrative being equally annoying. Um, I I don't share your opinion of not knowing what Colorado is going to be this next year, because I genuinely think that Colorado is going to be a dumpster fire. And how much do the And the hilarious thing is, I think it has very little to do with all of the off the field. Well, I just don't think that Deion Sanders is a good on the field coach. I think he's a good motivator, and I think he'd be a hell of a recruiting coordinator anywhere he went. But I don't think he's a particularly good on the field coach. And, you saw that last year when he got gift wrapped Sean Lewis as his offensive coordinator and was somehow able to do nothing with it because he wanted his son to shine even more.
Yeah. Who's their new OC? It's
Pat Shurmur.
Shurmur, yeah. Which I remember when I heard that was the hire, I was like, oh, all right.
Yeah. Good luck.
Yeah, so that was definitely an interesting choice. But no, I think you're right. The Sean Lewis, like on paper, where like when I saw Deion putting his staff together, I thought, wow, like he's like really made some really great hires. Like I was like, Sean Lewis, that's a fantastic hire. But he lost his job before the season was even over, I think.
Yeah.
Or at the very least, he lost play calling.
Yeah, because and by the way, yes, they did get worse after Sean Lewis lost the play calling duties. Surprise, surprise. But what is Sean Lewis doing now? Isn't he the head coach at like SD State?
I have no idea actually, but
It's all for time. I'm looking at.
Yeah, I can't feel too bad for him if he ends up at a good FCS school as a head coach, if that's what ends up being true. Because I mean, he was at Kent State before, and like that's like they fell off pretty quick.
Yeah,
so
it is SD State, by the way.
Yeah, so that's a pretty good spot to land at, honestly. So shout out to SD State, but like San Diego State or South Dakota State?
San Diego.
Okay.
I should clarify.
Yes, I guess it doesn't really matter because both of those are actually really good landing spots for him and like upgrades, I think, from Kent State. But
yeah, I also will say that the laughter that I will have will be unbearable if San Diego State has like a top 20 offense this next year.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to wait and see on that. But they kind of always seem to hang around in every sport. I mean, they were in the Final Four a couple years ago in basketball, but like they've been in and out of being pretty solid in football as well. They have great helmets too, so they have that going for them.
Yep. So now that we've ended it with last little bit of non-K-State news, do you have any final thoughts? I know that preseason practices have started up, but none of the press conferences really gave us anything revealing. They never do, but.
I was gonna say, like, Avery shouted out, I think, every receiver on the roster when asked about breakout candidates. Keegan Johnson's been mentioned a lot, kind of like last year, so we'll see if that continues. Soccer has a exhibition match against Arkansas Friday, August 9th, and they start the season next Thursday, August 15th. So I hope that they are better.
Yeah, I agree. I also hope that they're better. I guess Joe Jackson also got a couple shout outs, which
he did.
Imagine being in that running back room, dude. That's insane. But no. Thank you all for listening to this episode of the Aggieville Alleycats podcast. If you want to follow or contact the show, you can follow us just about anywhere at Aggieville Alleycats. And if you want to email us, we're aggievillealleycats@gmail.com. If you want to follow us on a more personal note, I am at ACEdwards00.
I am at Connor Baltazar, capital C, capital B.
And if you want to support the show financially, please be sure to check out both the official merch store and the official supporters link for the Aggieville Alleycats in our podcast and Twitter bios. But most importantly, thank you all for listening to this episode of the Aggieville Alleycats podcast. Where come rain, shine, or anything between, we're here to deliver to you the Kansas State sporting news that you so love. Stay safe, Alleycats.